sisters, allies, loved ones, and friends. Welcome to As Told by Childless Women, an oral history series that aims to usher our stories into the permanent archives of global history, where they've always needed to be. I'm your host, Jobi Tyson, and the founder of Tutum Global, a media platform for childless women. And when I first envisioned this series, I knew I wanted to take an active role in documenting the narratives of involuntary childless women and the childless experience. As a researcher, I know too well that archives have the power to preserve community memory and influence individual identity. Our first installment's theme is focused on women who are childless by circumstance, which seeks to address an often hidden subgroup of childlessness, one still mostly absent from our cultural narrative. Women who are childless by circumstance wanted children and perhaps could have children, but never were able for various reasons. The reason today's guest is childless by circumstance is because she was born with a rare disorder that only affects approximately 1 in 5,000 newborn girls in the general population. I'm excited and honored to have our guest hailing from Norway by way of England with a fascinating circumstantial journey. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Charlotte Bishop. Hey, Charlotte, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jobi, thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you here. And I'm excited to share your story with our audience. When you reached out to me at Childless Women Instagram page, you shared that you had a rare condition called MRKH syndrome, which is a congenital disorder of the female reproductive system. And I'd like for you to just tell us who you are and explain a little bit what is MRKH and what that acronym stands for.
Of course. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Charlotte. Some people know me as Charlie as well. And I'm 36. I live in Norway, as Jobi said. And I was diagnosed with MRKH when I was 16. Which is quite a typical age to be diagnosed with the condition, and I'll explain a little bit more about why that's the case. So MRKH is quite a mouthful of an acronym, which stands for Mayer Rokitansky Küster Hauser syndrome. So you probably understand why we shorten it to MRKH.
Where's that name originated?
So the name comes from the medical professionals that found the condition. So over years, it started with Rokitansky, and then they added the kind of components together. So by the end, I think it was the 1960s that the last of the medical professionals was added, or the picture was complete. Okay. A general understanding by that stage. Okay. So as Jobi says, it's a condition that affects the reproductive system. So I was born without a womb, which meant I didn't start my period. So I have ovaries, which means my puberty started as normal. Everything else externally, breast development, all that kind of thing starts as you'd expect. But I didn't have periods, so I went to the doctors, and they did various tests, and it took several months to kind of go through that process to work towards a diagnosis. And then I was told that I had a condition called MRKH, which of course I'd never heard of. Neither had my parents and my friends. And it's a condition that affects 1 in 5,000. So it's rare, but it's not as rare as some conditions. And there are two types of MRKH. There is the type that I have, which is the most common, where you have absent or a very small uterus that is kind of useless from an operational sense. And you also have a shortened vaginal tract because we don't have a cervix or anything like that. And then there are and then we have a type 2 where 40% of those people may have problems with their kidneys, of which a proportion of those may only have one kidney. And then a smaller number may have impacts to their hearing or to skeletal changes. And now more recently, they're identifying some link to some heart-related conditions as well. So type 2 is rarer, but tends to obviously have a range of different effects. And whilst even type 1 conditions, you can have quite a lot of variation, but in principle, at least, it's being born without a womb and kind of shortened vaginal tract. So it's kind of tricky as a teenager to be told that, and then to try and navigate, well, what this means, and it kind of puts the thought of children and family and future in your head at an age where you probably were never planning on thinking about those things. Certainly I wasn't until that point. So
well, I remember when you reached out on Instagram, you mentioned that we were talking about birth control pills, and you mentioned it kicks you got birth control pills when you were a teen to kickstart your period.
Yeah.
But how could that happen without a uterus?
Yeah, it didn't. So that was the thing. So they used that so they used that as a process. I guess it was to check if there was any hormone imbalance, and it was a reasonably easy thing for them to do, to prescribe some birth control pills and see if that prompts anything, because of course we still have ovaries, so we still have a cycle. We don't often track it in the same way, although some people do, and that can become important later if you go down an IVF route, to kind of have some idea of where your cycle is from an ovulation point of view. So we tend to be, whilst we're considered infertile because we can't carry our own child, it is, we tend to actually be quite high in fertility because we have ovaries which are often functioning quite well, but of course there's nowhere for us to carry our own child.
So how did it affect you as a teen, or did it?
Yeah, no, it did. I spent the first, certainly the first year, in a bit of a daze. Like, I didn't really know. It's really hard to be faced with that at that age, and you kind of feel like a freak. You don't really know, why has this happened to me? You're never prepared for this from a sexual education point of view. You're told as a female that you'll have periods. This is the process, and all of this stuff that you learn at school then suddenly seems completely wrong. You're then trying to relearn and learn new things and find the support groups, and I was lucky in the UK where I'm from. There is a national centre for MRKH in London, and I was referred there quite quickly after diagnosis. So I do count myself quite lucky to have had that chance to find that support network, and that the hospital there offers a lot of, at the time at least, it was more on a kind of face-to-face support and clinical and staff support, but over time that added with mental health support through psychology and counselling, which you don't realize how, I think I've come to realize more as time's gone on, how much it actually affects you psychologically as well, to try and process all that. And it seems so much to kind of deal with at that age, and to try and consolidate all those feelings and try and manage everything. It's a very tricky process.
How were you able to manage it?
I would say badly at times, but I think it went through phases. I mean, I think when I was certainly a teenager, before I went and when I went to university, I handled it badly. I kind of got myself into messes. I drink too much and get carried away, and just use something to block out the pain. And I did go to some counselling sessions at the time to try and find a way through, but I wasn't really in the right headspace to really face it. I think I was just trying to block it out so much. I just wanted to get on with life, but at the same time I had this thing that felt like it was hanging over me. And it wasn't until I was later in my 20s where I thought, do you know what, this is getting too much. It's taking over, and I don't, what can I do about this? And that's when I particularly when some of my friends were having children, and I was like, oh, how do I deal with this? How do I want to be there for my friends, but at the same time I'm really struggling to know how to be part of that conversation, and not like break down into a mess on the floor. And it's really hard to, and I was always quite open with my friends about it from quite an early stage, but trying to really explain to someone kind of going through such a joyous process themselves that you can't any way relate to. it's really difficult to explain that, and you don't want to bring them down, but there's some hard decisions during that time to how to manage it.
So is it hereditary? What causes it?
So they don't really know. They're still investigating. There's still quite a lot of work that's being undertaken. There's a number of researchers globally. I think that probably the US and parts of Europe, but Denmark are doing quite a lot of research into MRKH. Certainly when I was diagnosed, it was thought that it was probably not hereditary, but they are seeing some signs in some cases, but it's not a consistent enough. They can't say for certain because it is so variable. But it's essentially something during probably the early stages of pregnancy where, as part of the chromosome development, something just doesn't develop. One of the chromosomes doesn't develop in the way that it should. They don't quite know the cause. So that's still something that's outstanding even after. I think the first probably records of this were kind of the early 1900s, where it started being explored and having some name associated with it, and there are various names that are used for the same term, but it's not clear what the cause is. It's I guess unlike some other conditions that affect fertility, there's often a known cause, but in this case it's not, unfortunately, not yet at least.
So since the reproductive system is underdeveloped or not developed at all, are most females born as preemies?
That's a good question. Actually, I wasn't, but I do know some that were, and I probably, again, it's one of those things that it can be and it may not be. It's pretty variable, but it's certainly not always the case. I've got ovaries, but so I also had to have, and this is very common with those with MRK, so I also had to have go through a treatment process, which varies depending on country to that I chose to do, which was to so I could have a comfortable sex life, for want of a better phrase. But to the vaginal opening, I guess, is not often big enough to make that, if that's the route you want to go down. And there are various different ways that you can do that, and some choose not to do it at all. I wanted to do it for my own benefit, but and there are some kind of non-surgical routes for that, and also some countries prefer a surgical route, so there are different approaches to that. But otherwise, I have ovaries, but they're in kind of weird places because they're not kind of fixed in the same way that they would be. So I think I have one quite low in my pelvis. I had a scan some years ago, and then one quite kind of much higher towards my rib cage. So they're kind of a bit mismatched in terms of location, but that's quite common as well in terms of location, because they don't have there's a void there, of course, where there would be something, or there is typically something with those that don't have MRKH.
Okay. So speaking of the vaginal cavity and sex life and all of that, how did it affect your dating life? Did you tell guys up front, or your partners up front? How did that work?
That's a really good question. Yes, I probably found it much easier to tell guys than I did to tell girls, to be honest, because I found telling girls about talking about saying vagina out loud on it's just not a conversation that I typically had with my girlfriends. And but with boys, and I was going out with a guy at the time, and he took it really badly, but I guess some months after that, I was dating someone else, and I had to explain to him, because we were starting to get to that point where we wanted to be more intimate, and I had to explain to him, well, like, we can't really do that right now. I'm not yet at that point. And so I explained to him, and he was really patient. He was really understanding of what that meant, and he was, whilst I went through this treatment, it's called dilator therapy. It's the same type of approach that's used for conditions like vaginismus, but obviously in a different kind of way. But it's the same kind of thing where you essentially insert something into the canal. These they look a bit like the kind of sex education classes where you put a condom on a cucumber kind of thing, or a plastic phallic looking item, and then you use that in different sizes to stretch out the canal. And once that's done to a point, then you don't have to do that all the time, but it takes some time to kind of build up that point. Okay. And then once I was at a certain point, and I, since then, and that was, nearly 20 years ago, that was, it's not been a problem. I've always wondered, like, does it feel any different? But I've always been told it doesn't. It's the same. And it, I find it's, perfectly comfortable and seemingly normal for me, normal, whatever. I'm happy, so that's the main thing.
I always say that motherhood does not equate womanhood, but being born without a womb, and I also don't have a womb because I had a hysterectomy.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but how, with being born without a womb, how did that make you question your womanhood?
Yeah, it made me really feel like the question, was I really a woman? Now, everyone who's born with MRKH is at least genetically female, and so there's no question from a chromosome DNA point of view in terms of sex, but it is a condition that naturally does challenge your identity, and there's a number of people with MRKH who identify as intersex. And various other, obviously there are a whole spectrum of different identities that people can have, and I don't personally identify as intersex. I find myself very much feeling very female, cisgendered, and happy with how I am. But it's of course everyone has their own feeling and identity, and I absolutely did question, is this, is this right? This doesn't feel, I don't feel like I'm not experiencing the same things that my friends are going through. And while, even the thought of having periods just kind of terrifies me because I've never had one. It feels very strange not to have had those experiences and be able to be part of those conversations, and lying to my friends when I was at school as to, I don't have a tampon, I don't have a sanitary pad. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned intersex, and I was reading not too long ago that women with MRKH identify with the transgender women because transgender women clearly don't have a reproductive system.
Yeah.
And they've been able to bond with transgender women. What do you know about that, or has that been an experience for you?
I haven't experienced that directly, other than, one of my roles is I'm a director of the charity MRKH Connect, and we're a charity registered in England, but it's very much a wider international charity where the whole premise behind our mission is to bring people together with MRKH. And what I found and I've been a director for the last year, is from talking to people, there is such a range of people, a lot of pride in people's identity, a lot of empowerment in how they see themselves and how they want to be seen by others, and really trying to, I guess for my own benefit, I've felt like I've learned quite a lot from the wider community, and from being much more involved in the community in the last year than perhaps I was in the past, where I had a more peripheral role, and I had a personal blog. I used to write about MRKH, and then I got involved with the charity a few years ago, and then you start to discuss with people and learn their stories, and then suddenly you're engaging with others that you probably wouldn't have otherwise in the same respect, but you're learning more, and I think that's really important as well to understand people's reasons, and how obviously something like this can have a great effect, but I can certainly see why there are people that identify as intersex, and there are some groups that are focused on that. There is a group on Facebook that is focused on that, and they have some really insightful posts on there that are I'm grateful to be part of the group, even though I'm not intersex, just to learn more about where they're coming from with some of their points, which are totally valid.
Okay. As a researcher, it would be remiss that I didn't ask about statistics. And I know the disorder is underdiagnosed and under research, but can you share the few stats that you have on MRKH?
That's a tricky one. I'm not sure I have too many to share, but I mean, other than the ones that we do know, because I think the challenge is that there is such a lot of variation. So there are some stats. Actually, I do have some stats that I saw recently, that just bear with me. So there was a presentation one of my friends and colleagues did a couple of weeks ago that kind of went through some of the statistics of people seeking treatment, people seeking different routes to family, for example. So maybe that's a good route to go down. So there, for example, we talked a little bit about the different treatment to lengthen the vaginal canal for whatever reason that might be, whether it's sex or whether it's just kind of a feeling of a step in the process of feeling a little bit more normal or whatever. You know, I hate the word normal, but you know what I mean. That's kind of why I did it. It kind of made me feel like I was making some progress, and but actually about 81% of people go down that route versus a surgical route, and that varies a little bit depending on geographic region. What I was quite interested about was the statistic, and I'll have to check exactly where my colleague got these findings, was that quite a large proportion of those with MRK go down an adoption route. So nearly 80% go down an adoption route of those that choose to have a family. And only I say only about 72% go down the surrogacy route.
Okay.
So and that's an IVF process, because we have, as I mentioned, we mainly have functioning ovaries. So be a gestational carrier, and then it would be, you know, a transfer of your own embryo in most cases, at least. And then there's many people, of course, who are, you know, quite a large proportion find the importance on mental health. 90% of people see the value of mental health support, and I think that's an area that is quite lacking. Other than there are support groups there, it's often very difficult for people to know where to go in their area. Are meetups in their area? Are there people that they can talk to, and how do they access that support? And particularly now during a pandemic, where perhaps some of those normal meetings are, you know, have had to be cancelled or postponed or moved to virtual, and that can have a significant impact on how you're feeling and how your state, how to process not only COVID, but, you know, how you're feeling at the same time. It's a really scary process for many.
Yeah. Okay. As it pertains to your life experiences, what does it mean to be a childless woman?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been something that I didn't expect. I'd always thought that I would have children. I was in a relationship for a very long time, and we started down the route of IVF, and we'd gone through tests, and we'd started that process, and then it kind of all fell apart, unfortunately, and we ended up, it ruined our relationship, and we decided to walk away, mainly because we weren't communicating about what we really wanted. I think we kind of pushed ahead with something that maybe we hadn't really talked about, and so I found myself in my early 30s not like thinking, oh god, this is it for life, I'm just going to be childless and miserable, and it's going to be horrible, and all my friends have children, and yeah, how am I going to cope with this? And that was a really big challenge for me, but also a turning point, because I think later that year I started going back to counselling and getting a bit more perspective, and trying to move away from thinking too much about the future and just living in the moment. And that's something that I really took away from that time, where despite all of the grief and all of the challenge that came with leaving a 10-year relationship and, and everything that came with that, was actually, I was so worried about the future. I wasn't taking time to manage how I was feeling then. And so I think that's when I thought, I can make a change here. And I started writing a blog, and I started processing my thoughts and feelings, still with an open mind about, whether I would go down a route of having a family at some stage. But I think by that point, certainly in the last, by about 2 or 3 years ago, I'd got to a point where I moved country. I moved to Norway. My partner lived in the UK, or lived in the UK until very recently, and we just decided that actually, life is pretty good as it is, and it's a difficult. I found that quite difficult to make that decision, and I guess process what that really meant. But I have a lot of children in my life that and I feel very lucky to have that, and it's great to be part of other larger family groups. I still have a family. I have friends in my family as well as my friends, and a very close-knit network. And I think family isn't just having children. It's like you were saying about womanhood. It's not just about, being a woman is not just about being a mother. Right. And for me, I think by getting a bit of perspective over the last few years, it helped me process my own emotions about being childless and what that means, and actually it's okay if it doesn't happen. And I'm now totally happy with the fact that, and don't ever expect it will happen, and I'm very happy with that. I think it's something that took a while for me to get to that point, but I think it's actually a better decision for me and my boyfriend, and where we see our future. But actually just living in the moment and enjoying life, and kind of taking that is more important for us anyway.
So are you in your 20s, 30s, 40s?
30s, 36.
Okay. So yeah, by the time I guess in the 30s, it gets a little, you get used to it from the 20s, because it was very harder for me in the 20s. Yeah. Okay. So writing your blog, and also being an advocate with the MRKH Connect, and also having therapy, is that how you've been able to cope with childlessness?
Yeah, definitely. I think being part of such a wide community, and the MRKH community, and actually, I guess the wider fertility community is, I found it's been interesting kind of delving into it more over the last year or two, and finding the support that is there, but also, I guess, the support that's lacking. And I'd say one of the things that I find from talking a lot with people with MRKH is that there is a lot of resources and a lot of support for people who are looking to explore a route to have children, but much less resources, fewer resources available to those that are childless, and what that means, and the implications. And I was chatting to another, I guess, fertility warrior, who she doesn't have MRK, but she's also in Norway, and we were chatting because she finds it very tough living somewhere like Scandinavia, which is very family oriented, to then that there is very little support from, I guess, a social perspective, a community perspective, for those who don't have children. And there's then that expectation of, oh, okay, well, Charlotte can do that because she doesn't have children, there's no commitment. And that's a kind of assumption that I hate. I mean, whether I choose to be childless or whatever the circumstance is, like that shouldn't be a reason to put someone in a position. And so I think whilst the community and my blog and all these other things have been a very kind of cathartic process for me to grieve in my own way, but also process what being childless means. It's also raised a lot of awareness for me as to we're missing a lot of information in support of childless women, and making sure that there is a voice heard. So as soon as I saw your post about this, I was very eager to be part of it, because I think it's really important topic to that there is still too few resources about raising awareness, because it's a topic that of course is often quite emotive. It's very hard to talk about, particularly the reasons behind it can be very challenging. And so I think the more, as you say, the more we talk about it, the better it will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're able to own our voice and control our narrative when we talk about it. So speaking of MRKH Connect,
yes,
what guide you to the path and your purpose there, and tell us a little about it.
Sure, yes. So it was a bit of a strange one. So after this kind of this difficult phase in my early 30s, and moving from a relationship, a very stable relationship, and finding myself feeling a bit lost and alone and not really knowing what the future holds, I started writing a blog, and we with a friend actually who also has MRKH, and we decided to. The reason we set it up was to challenge ourselves to raise some money for MRKH, because we saw there was a need. We both felt encouraged at the time to really put ourselves out there. We both told our friends about it, but we hadn't gone public. And I remember sitting in her kitchen and kind of pressing go on a post on Facebook and just like telling what felt like the world that that I had this and what it meant, and that we did this charity walk probably about 5 years ago to raise awareness, and it was a kind of great process to start to think about this and what could this mean, and the charity that we raised money for was MRKH Connect, and the lady who founded it was a girl called Kelly, and her friend Janet, who also has MRK, and we started chatting to them. It's a very small charity, and soon after that event, I decided to continue the blog because I really found it really useful for me, and they asked me if I would join the team and just do a bit of admin for them, and it's a totally volunteer charity, so I have a day job which is completely different, but I really enjoyed getting. I got a lot out of being able to chat to people, support people, and then they decided last year that they didn't feel in a position to take the charity into the next chapter, I guess, and they asked if I would be interested in taking over as director. So that's kind of how that happened, and so I came on board last summer, and we're still a small charity. We have a new board, which is kind of made up of we have a psychologist, we have a mum, we have a dad as well, we have a friend who's also gone through fertility challenges, and we have another MRK woman as well from a more cultural background. So we have some diversity to help in terms of ensuring that we're getting the message out there as we do, and also that we certainly see ourselves and hope people see us as an inclusive group. So we relaunched, actually, it took some time, but we relaunched the charity completely about 2 months ago. So we have a new website where it has a members area for those with MRKH who can chat together. We have a forum, we have a members map where people can see other people around the world and start a conversation. And it's just a community of resources, of both public and private resources, just community, and just building that up. And the main aim has always been to bring together and work with partner MRKH groups from across the world on different events and support different events and help facilitate. Obviously, it's tricky right now, but help facilitate people meeting up in person. And actually finding the support that obviously lots of people need at some point, even if they perhaps don't like to admit it at the time. So it's that's kind of what we're here for, and we have quite an active social media channel, and then it's we try and encourage people to get in touch with any questions, and take it from there, and then of course they can sign up for the website if they want to chat with some others in a bit more detail, which is great.
So I see Your Instagram handle is at MRKH Connect. What is the website?
It is mrkconnect.org.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And what industry do you work in outside of this?
It's going to be a bit of a, I don't think you can see the picture behind me, but it's an image from a satellite. So I actually interpret satellite imagery. It's very,
Oh,
very random.
that's a whole different show.
Completely different. So I've been working in this field for nearly 15 years, but it's a very I guess it's a data analyst, data management, project management kind of role. So we look at pictures of the earth to interpret them for different things. So anything from oil and gas to environment to mining. So we work with, I'm based in Norway, but we work with clients from all over the world. So it's very, very different, but certainly MRKH advocacy is high, very high on my passion list, and certainly of those on the board. And whilst we all have day jobs, we're all, we put a lot of hours into helping provide the materials and resources for the community and help and make sure and listen to the community. We're a community resource, and we want to hear from them as to what they want to see that we're not showing. So it's a collective from that point of view.
Mm-hmm. So going back, I forgot to ask you when you were talking about stats. Are there any stats on racial demographics for those who have MRKH?
Yeah, that's a very good question, but and I don't believe there are at the moment. But we're soon to start a study. Actually, that we're working with the university at the moment where we hope to explore that in a bit more detail. So hopefully, probably by this time next year, we should have some more results, at least from a UK perspective, and that won't be representative, but it will at least start to show some understanding of where that break and difference in access to care and what that split is from a cultural perspective. But certainly, I guess from a personal experience and attending support groups in person, it's very much a diverse group and from a range of different cultural backgrounds. And so it's not, I don't believe there's anything to say in the research that there's a higher probability in a particular group. But it is something that we find from an access to care and access to support is an important point that we're looking to explore and provide hopefully some helpful research into for the community going forward.
Okay. Well, we are so much more than our childless state. So I wanted to ask you, what brings you happiness?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I travel. I love to travel. My boyfriend and I love to travel and explore new places. We live in a beautiful part of the world. So, and at the moment we can still travel around it. So we can, whilst we can't travel outside of it, we can travel around the country, which is amazing. And getting out there, I probably in the last 6-7 years, I started running. I never ran before. I hated being outside even. It seems a bit ridiculous, but my dad always used to laugh at me when he'd try and get me outside into the garden with kick a football around with him and my brother, and I'd be like, no, I don't want to go. But now I love it. I love being outside. I love hiking and just kind of enjoying the moment, like taking the chance for some spontaneous. I was always so clear on like planning everything and like having everything very regimented, and I'm kind of brought up that way. And my mum is very organised, and so that's good. I've taken that positive side, but actually, I like having the spontaneity and the flexibility to kind of do my own thing, do our own thing, and I think that's what kind of brings me joy, other than of course providing support to the community. And that really does it maybe sounds a bit weird, but that does also bring me joy. I like to be able to support others and work with others and chat to people like you and others that I have through the last year or so, and it's great to have to widen that network and share experiences and raise awareness, and that's really positive as well.
Mm-hmm. So is that what you feel like is your life's purpose?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I think certainly right now, I see there's a real, I think I can bring some value to our community, and I really would like to, and I like everything that we're doing. I find is growing some momentum and an interest in the community in terms of how responsive they are, but also making sure that it's relevant to the community. That's really what's important for us, and because as soon as it becomes irrelevant, then of course that's not helpful for anyone. Working with the community, and certainly that is I would say right now definitely a purpose, but also being there for my friends and family and their children, many of whom are, I've got 4 godchildren, I've got friends who have children, and being there for them, and just being that kind of fun, kind of fake aunt that is, that is just a bit different, that is someone different that they can call upon, and being there for them in a different way, but having quite a special relationship with them. And I think that's really nice. I feel quite privileged to be in that position, even though I don't have, or even without having children myself.
Okay. Well, we're about to wrap up the interview, and I wanted to know if you had any last words for our audience.
Well, I guess I would say if any of you are struggling with childlessness or fertility issues in general, that you're not alone. It's a challenge. It is a process. For so long, I think I tried to rush myself through that and make myself feel better in often not very constructive ways. But there is support out there, and whilst it can take a little bit of time sometimes to find what's right for you, there are plenty of people to talk to, and many happy smiley faces who will be very happy to pick up the phone or send you a message. So support is there. Don't give up, and be kind to yourself, and look out for yourself and for others who perhaps are struggling.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing your story. Such conversations might even encourage other childless women to own their voice, and it was a true pleasure to be with you today. Thank you, and I'll see you later.
Thank you, Jobi.
Childless woman, you're beautiful. Child-free woman, you are enough. This journey might not be easy, but we're in this together so we can get through this together by owning our voice. Thank you for your time and attention today. Please like, subscribe, share, and download this episode. From Tutum Global, I'm your host, Jobi Tyson. See you next time on As Told by Childless Women. To support this series, please visit astoldbychildlesswomen.com.